If you're in the rat race, you're a rat, period. And there's nothing wrong with that. But just make sure you include the student athletes and their rights within the rat race as well. And now they finally have some. And they're taking off at the first sign of trouble, and they're looking for the most money, just like the adults. And there's nothing wrong with that. The college football world, really, we could say college sports, but football drives the train, right? Has exploded again. I wasn't the least bit surprised. I mean, you could tell me that Ohio State and Alabama are going to go over to China and form their own college football league. I wouldn't blink an eye. How could anybody have been surprised at this news yesterday? What could possibly surprise you about universities chasing money? What? I looked at the headline and said, okay. I remembered an Andy Staples story from last year. Good morning, Fulsey. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm enjoying this. Please continue.
In which Andy Staples in The Athletic, in the wake of Texas and Oklahoma bolting the SEC, bolting the Big 12 for the SEC, shook up the college football world. Like, wow, that was real surprising that someone would go to the SEC to set themselves up for more TV money. That was, that was a shocker, I'll tell you. So in the wake of that, Andy Staples wrote that the next logical move would be for the Big Ten to raid the Pac-12. Oh, my God, no, that could never happen, right? Because Jim Phillips and the rest of them have looked each other in the eye. They had an alliance, the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12. You didn't believe Jim Phillips at the time? Listen again to how convincing this man sounded at the announcement of the ACC, Big Ten, Pac-12 alliance. This wasn't about money. No, this wasn't about protecting their money. This was about looking another person in the eye and trusting them, and they were going to take care of the student athlete and the fan.
I'd say this, Bruce. It's about trust. It's about we've looked each other in the eye. We've made an agreement. We have great confidence and faith. Our board chairs have looked each other in the eye and have committed to the same level of support and connection to one another. Our athletics directors have done that. And so if that's what it takes to get something considerable done, then, we've lost our way.
We lost our way a long, long time ago in college football, my friend. Nice try, though, Jim. Nice try. So let's go back to Andy Staples because he foresaw this, where the Big Ten, I don't know, does that qualify as breaking an alliance there? Does that qualify as breaking a trust, Maddie,
Yeah,
taking your two highest profile schools other than Oregon?
I'd say
the
there's
LA
some
market?
kind of backstabbing going on there.
Not one, but both schools from the LA market. They didn't even leave one out west. They took both. I think the alliance is broken, but here's the important thing for you as a Pitt fan and maybe some West Virginia fans out there. Are you listening, Crowley? Here's the important thing. Let me take you through this because I'm going to rely on Andy Staples because he's great at his job and he foresaw this, okay? And I'm going to quote him a couple times here. USC and UCLA deciding to move to the Big Ten opened the hole through the center of the earth in college football. There is no bottom. Anything you can imagine feels possible at this point. Of course it does, right? And Andy is now predicting, as a lot of us did at the time last year, as so many people have, a super league. And he's dividing it into two leagues, basically, almost like an old AFL and NFL. As he writes, the Super League doesn't feel like a theoretical concept anymore. It feels inevitable. This is happening, okay? You're watching it real time. We're moving toward a Super League, the only question being who's in and who's out. There's a couple questions, who's in, who's out, and how they divide it up. And it's about, in many ways, such a simple concept, money. You always follow the money. And it would be, take a school like any school from any of the major conferences. And eventually they have to ask themselves the question, if you're, let's say, USC, UCLA, why are we sharing our money with Oregon State, our TV money? Why would we do that? Ohio State, why are we sharing our television money with Maryland? You know? Or pick another school, Illinois, anybody. So, according to Staples, the question is, will it be one Super League or two, right? And he's talking about something like the AFL and NFL way back in the 1960s, something along the lines of that model. And of course, it would be basically SEC and Big Ten. Figure out what to do with Notre Dame? Sure. I'm not sure Notre Dame is as important as everybody thinks it is. If Notre Dame canceled college football tomorrow, guess what? There would still be a big, huge SEC and a big, huge Big Ten, and they could both make tons of money. They could. Would it be nice to have Notre Dame? Sure would. And either one of them have a shot. Either one of these super conferences, super leagues, SEC, Big Ten, would have a shot at Notre Dame. Here's where you worry if you're a Pitt fan or a West Virginia fan. Here's how Staple breaks them down. 2 20-team conferences in this Super League, okay? One is the Big Ten, which would now be the Big 20. He says you keep everybody in, okay? Nobody gets kicked out, not even Rutgers, okay? The new members, USC, UCLA, already in, starting in 2024. By the way, in a not unrelated issue, the Big Ten is the first of the big leagues with a new television contract on the horizon here. Okay, so the new members would be USC, UCLA, and then Oregon and Washington. And there's already reports or rumors of those schools coming east. Then Utah and Notre Dame. Those would be your new members of the Big Ten. Okay, that's a 20-team conference. I didn't see Pitt on that list. Certainly didn't see West Virginia. Then you have the SEC. You keep all your existing members, including Vanderbilt. The new members would be Oklahoma, Texas, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, and Miami. How about that? And Staples says he wanted to include Georgia Tech and Virginia, but ran out of room. So he didn't even mention Pitt in the also receiving votes category here. He said, I needed to add a fifth school west of the Rockies to form a new division, so Utah got that spot. Wanted to add NC State, Virginia Tech, and Oklahoma State to the SEC, didn't have space. Man, I didn't see Pitt or West Virginia listed there. So let me ask you this. Duke isn't even there. Baylor's not included in these two new super leagues that Staples proposes. In the case of Duke, he says, I wondered if their brand will be the same with Mike Krzyzewski retired. So where do we go from here? I remember talking and writing about this when last year's explosion happened. Man, we're headed for a super league here, and if it's 40 teams, is Pitt one of them? Because let's be honest, you could be the staunchest Pitt fan out there, and they have an incredible tradition, and they had a good year last year. We know all that. But if the bottom line is eyeballs on games, what does Pitt really, in the end, have to offer here? I mean, that's an honest question. Feel free to answer it at 412-928-9370. But there's a reason a guy as sharp as Andy Staples makes 2 20-team leagues here, plus also receiving votes category, and never mentions Pitt in his column. That doesn't mean football is going to end at Pitt. It just means what would be your vehicle by which to get into a playoff if you're ever going to do that, and how far off the blanking radar would you be if you're not included in one of these 20-team leagues?
The only thing that I can think of, and this is very, very recent history, of course, as to you say, what does Pitt really have to offer? The only thing that they can stand on right now is that they are the ACC champions. They're the defending ACC champions.
That ain't much
That's
because
not
the
much.
ACC, well, just put it this way.
And it's just 1 year.
The story I saw about the ACC's future today said it's time for the ACC to throw a Hail Mary. You just heard from the guy who's running the conference. He wasn't all that convincing. I get that. They were a pretty good program, a pretty good team last year. But you understand what I'm saying.
Oh, I
mean,
totally agree. But that's the only thing that I can think of
Yeah.
to answer your question.
They're interested in who brings in eyeballs, what kind of market can we bring in here? And if you're talking, well, let's say the Big Ten, which a lot of people wish Pitt had gone to the Big Ten. They're thinking about, under the Staples model, they would be thinking about USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Utah, and Notre Dame. I think you have reason to be very concerned. I wish it wasn't that way. I wish I wasn't saying this. But I wonder about the future of Pitt football as a visible entity. What would be next, by the way, Matt? What do you think would be next for the likes of Pitt and West Virginia? Because there's also other schools, at least, that are high profile, if not football